Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for January the 25th. Today we are reading together in Genesis chapter 30, where we're going to learn some more about the sons and a daughter born to Jacob by a number of women, unfortunately, and that is only going to produce a number of issues within this family. And then we're going to see at the end of this text how Jacob is dealing with his wonderful father-in-law. I'll tell you what, I definitely, after reading this text and seeing the relationship between Jacob and Laban, I definitely appreciate my father-in-law even more than I already did. Certainly appreciate his kindness and that he is not a scheming, maniacal guy like Laban seems to be. Let's get the text of Genesis 30 up on the screen. At least I don't think that Mitchell is a scheming, maniacal guy like Laban. He's always been good to me. I appreciate him. Here in Genesis 30, again, it's good to back up because not the best chapter break in the world here. We start reading about Jacob's sons back in verse 31 of chapter 29. We see 4 that are born to Leah, not to Rachel, the preferred wife, but to Leah, the neglected wife. We see Reuben being born, also Simeon, Levi, and then Judah. And she is focusing on the Lord in a number, or in all of these names that are given. There is a focus on God and on Yahweh being good to her. We're going to contrast that with the way that Rachel deals with things. Now, unfortunately, here we're going to see Leah get caught up in this a little bit, have a bit of a low point in her attitude. She's normally got a pretty good attitude. Sees things in a very good way, but she gets caught up in this a little bit here. We'll notice that as we go through this text, looking at the sons of Jacob born to him by Leah first, and then not just Leah, but then Bilhah, and then Zilpah, and then Rachel eventually. Reading here in Genesis chapter 30, verse number 1, when Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she envied her sister. "Give me sons, or I will die," she said to Jacob. Jacob became angry with Rachel and said, "Am I in the place of God? He has withheld offspring from you," because obviously he's having children with Leah, so it's not Jacob's fault. Then she said, this is what Rachel said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go, sleep with her, and she'll bear children for me, so that through her I too can build a family." So Rachel gave her slave Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her. Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. Yes, he has heard me and given me a son." So she named him Dan. Rachel's slave Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Rachel said, "In my wrestlings with God, I've wrestled with my sister and won." She named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her own slave Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune!" And she named him Gad. Then Leah's son Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Leah said, "I am happy that the women call me happy." So she named him Asher. Reuben went out during the wheat harvest and found some mandrakes in the field. When he brought them to his mother Leah, Rachel asked, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But Leah replied to her, "Isn't it enough that you have taken my husband? Now you also want to take my son's mandrakes?" "Well then," Rachel said, "he can sleep with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came in from the field that evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come with me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So Jacob slept with her that night. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, "God has rewarded me for giving my slave to my husband." And she named him Issachar. Then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. "God has given me a good gift," Leah said. "This time my husband will honor me because I have borne him 6 sons." And she named him Zebulun. Later, Leah bore a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." She named him Joseph and said, "May Yahweh add another son to me." After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way so I can return to my, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. Let's see here. Verse number 25. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way so that I can return to my homeland. Give me my wives and my children that I have worked for, and let me go. You know how hard I have worked for you. But Laban said to him, if I have found favor with you, stay. I have learned by divination that Yahweh has blessed me because of you. Then Laban said, name your wages, and I will pay them. So Jacob said to him, you know how I have served you, and your herds have fared with me. For you had very little before I came, but now your wealth has increased. The Lord has blessed you because of me. And now, when will I also do something for my own family? Laban asked, what should I give you? Jacob said, you don't need to give me anything. If you do this one thing for me, I will continue to shepherd and keep your flock. Let me go through all your sheep today and remove every sheep that is speckled or spotted, every dark-colored sheep among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the female goats. Such will be my wages. In the future, when you come to check on my wages, my honesty will testify for me. If I have any female goats that are not speckled or spotted, or any lambs that are not black, they will be considered stolen. Good, said Laban. Let it be as you have said. That day Laban removed the streaked and spotted male goats and all the speckled and spotted female goats, every one that had any white on it, and every dark-colored one among the lambs. He placed his sons in charge of them. He put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob. Jacob, meanwhile, was shepherding the rest of Laban's flock. Jacob then took branches of fresh poplar, almonds, and plain wood, and peeled the bark, exposing white strips on the branches. He set the peeled branches in the troughs in front of the sheep, in the water channels where the sheep came to drink, and the sheep bred when they came to drink. The flocks bred in front of the branches and bore streaked, speckled, and spotted young. Jacob separated the lambs and made the flocks face the streaked sheep and the completely dark sheep in Laban's flocks. Then he set his own stock apart and didn't put them with Laban's sheep. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob placed the branches in the troughs in full view of the flocks, and they would breed in front of the branches. As for the weaklings of the flocks, he did not put out the branches. So it turned out that the weak sheep belonged to Laban, and the stronger ones to Jacob. And the man became very rich. He had many flocks, female and male slaves, and camels and donkeys. And that is Genesis chapter 30. All right, so let's get into the family drama of Jacob and his, again, to begin with, 2 wives. And by the time we get through this chapter, he now has 4 wives. He has Leah, the one who was tricked upon him. Then he has the one whom he truly loves, at least at this point in the story, Rachel, and she does not have children. But we get some echoes from the story of Abraham and Sarah, where Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham to produce an heir, and she assumed that heir for herself. That's kind of the way this thing worked. It was very, very strange that, and actually goes back, or it ties in, I think, what we're going to see in Ruth too, where Naomi kind of adopts Ruth's son as her own to have one that she would kind of claim to be her own son since her 2 sons died. But that's just kind of a practice at this point, that if you had a slave, the slave might have a child, and you would assume that child as your own, as if it was your own child that you had birthed. Just an interesting thing that took place within these ancient Near Eastern cultures. But here within the first few verses, we have Rachel, who cannot have children. She blames Jacob. Jacob says, well, obviously it's not me, because Leah is coming up with children, so that can't be my fault. It's the Lord who has kept you from doing this thing. So she becomes frustrated and takes Bilhah, says, hey, have this son. And again, Rachel basically claims those sons as her own. And notice that in naming the child, she does not give glory to Yahweh. Instead, she uses him to boast and says, now I've gotten a victory over my sister. Well, there's another child that comes, and this time again, in my wrestlings with God, I've wrestled with my sister and won. Again, she's boasting in her victory, her supposed victory over her sister in this sibling rivalry, and she does not give glory to God. Whereas Leah, in her 4 sons originally, all of their names had something to do with showing appreciation to Yahweh. But unfortunately, Leah, she stoops to Rachel's level. She takes her own slave, and she gives Zilpah to Jacob. She bears sons, Gad and Asher. And unfortunately, Leah here does not give God much glory in this as well. Later on, there's going to be this interesting scene where Reuben goes out to get some mandrakes, and Rachel wants these mandrakes, and she says, well, give me those. And Leah says, well, you've already taken my husband. I had him first, and now you've basically stolen his heart. You're going to take this from my son now too? Rachel says, well, you just give him to me, and if you'll do that, then I'll let you have Jacob for tonight. So that's what happens. And what's very interesting about this child that is conceived, presumably on this night, is that she names him Issachar, and she said that God has rewarded me for giving my slave to my husband. That's very interesting that she says that. I don't think that's exactly right, but it is interesting to note that God listened to Leah, and that Issachar was a result of God listening to her prayer and granting that to her. So just an interesting thing to note. She conceives again gives glory to God. God has given me a good gift, names that son Zebulun, that she has a daughter too. And then it says that God did remember Rachel. Now, one of the things about these mandrakes, going back to that, is that I have a note here that says a plant possessing tuberous roots resembling human torsos. The mandrake was thought to enhance one's sexual powers and fertility. So she might be thinking, Rachel, is that if I take these, then I'll have a better chance of getting pregnant and being able to bear sons myself for Jacob. Well, here she does have sons, but it's not because of the mandrakes. No, she has sons because God remembered her. He opened up her womb. And yet again, she doesn't give glory to God. She doesn't really show appreciation. All she says is, God has taken away my disgrace. There's no thank you for doing that. And instead of, again, giving glory to God, she just says, give me another one. You give me one, give me a second one. Rachel just shows herself to really lack spiritual insight, spiritual focus. She is not spiritually minded at all. She might have been the better looking of the 2 sisters. She might have been the one that Jacob's fleshly eyes pursued. But I think we see pretty clearly that Leah has a much more positive spiritual nature to her. And eventually that's going to bear out. And Rachel just does a lot of really not good things. That's why later on, and I believe it's in chapter, let's see here, later on in chapter, I think it's chapter 34, chapter 35, she's not even going to be buried with the rest of the family. And I believe that to be an indictment on her character. So again, here's the simple lesson to learn from this. Again, Glinda shared the funny quote about marrying ugly women. No, just don't marry sisters. Don't marry sisters, and we will avoid a number of issues. And for the ladies, don't marry brothers. That would cause a lot of issues as well, not just spiritually, but I think with the government, that polygamy thing is certainly frowned upon. Now, at this point, with these sons born to Jacob, the language here as he speaks to Laban, send me on my way so that I can return to my homeland. Give me my wives and my children that I've worked for. It seems as if Jacob doesn't feel as if he's in true possession of his family, that it's not really his. He's still on Laban's land after all. So give me what is mine so I can go establish my own house. But not only that, there is also this idea of returning to his homeland, because remember, he's got a vow to fulfill. That's in chapter 28, verses 20 through 22, that Yahweh would be his God. So he's got this on the mind. It's time for him to return home. It's time for him to get going on his own. Laban, though, says, well, I found out through this divination, which identifies him clearly as an idolater, through divination, I've seen that the Lord has blessed me because of you. So I don't want you to go. You're kind of like my golden goose. You're the one that, when as long as you're with me, things are going well for you. So you just name your price, and I'll keep you here, and you can stay here and continue to prosper me. Again, so not a father-in-law son-in-law relationship at all. Again, makes me appreciate mine so much more, but is definitely much more of a servant employee type of relationship here. That's the way that Jacob seems to be viewed by Laban. And Jacob calls on him, though. Jacob says, listen, before I came, you had nothing. You were a scrub. You were not successful. But now that I've been here, you are extremely blessed. Your wealth has increased. The Lord has blessed you because of me. Well, shouldn't I go and bless my family and allow my family to prosper as well? Laban says, just tell me, what should I give you? Jacob says, don't give me anything. This is what we're going to do. He has this plan. His plan is, let me go through the sheep and the goats. Let me go through the sheep and the goats, and any of the sheep that are speckled or spotted, or that are dark colored. Let's see here. Every sheep that is speckled or spotted, and every dark colored sheep among the lambs, and the spotted and speckled among the female goats, such will be my wages. Basically, he is selecting the least common colors for these animals. Best I can tell, what we have here is that sheep are normally light colored. So he says, give me the dark ones. Goats were normally solid colored. Give me the multicolored ones. And those will be mine. So it would have been, again, less than one particular writer said that it would have been less than 20% of the flock would probably match this description. So let me have those. And at the end of the time, you come check what I have. If any of them's not matching this description, you can count them as stolen, and we'll go from there. What's very interesting to me is that Jacob says, my honesty will testify for me. That's a big change for very deceptive Jacob here in this moment. Laban says, all right, sounds good. But then Laban tries to hedge his bets here by removing the streaked and spotted male goats and the speckled and spotted female goats and all the dark colored lambs. He takes them all and puts distance between that group of the flock and then what Jacob has, which would be the pure colored ones of the flock. And that way they can't have any crossbreeding, anything of that nature. And he, again, puts distance between them, a 3 days journey in between them, so that the possible breeding benefits will not be there for Jacob. Well, Jacob has his own idea of how he's going to help this. Again, I believe he's trusting in the Lord here, but just because he trusts in the Lord doesn't mean he's not going to do what he can in the situation as well. I have confidence that he trusts in the Lord because he ends up giving God credit for what took place, what takes place later on in chapter 31. What he does is he gets some sticks, he peels the bark back, and he puts them in front of the sheep as they breathe. There was this old wives' tale that if the sheep are looking at something, whatever the color is of something that the sheep are looking at or the goats are looking at when they breed, that would have an impact upon the baby goat or baby sheep that would be conceived at that point. Again, that's kind of silly. That makes no sense. But it worked. And it worked. And Jacob was smart. He did this with the strongest of the flock. So what he basically did is let's say, took 2 white sheep. As they're mating, they would be looking at a speckled color piece of wood, and presumably the conceived offspring then would be speckled, would be streaked, would be dark color, whatever it might be. So you have that taking place among the strongest of the group, but for the weaker of the flock, Jacob doesn't do this. So they are produced. So what we have then is the weaklings are producing plain colored offspring of the flock, and the strongest are producing the multicolored offspring within this flock, which again is going to multiply the numbers in Jacob's favor, and also it'd be the strongest of the sheep and the goats, whereas the weaklings are producing the same colored, plain colored offspring. Therefore, they're having offspring, yes, but they're not the strongest of the flock. So whenever this happens, this does happen, and then verse 43 kind of gives us a status update, and it says that the man became very rich, referring to Jacob. He had many flocks, female and male slaves and camels and donkeys. And of course, this is all being done because God had prospered him. And again, in chapter 31, I believe he's going to express explicitly that it was God who had blessed him. All throughout this chapter, especially going back to the first section, we see God blessing these wives of Jacob. And yet only one of them really focused on giving glory to God for the good thing that she had received. Rachel seems very snooty. She seems very arrogant. She seems uptight and pretentious. She seems to expect for these good things to happen and doesn't pause to give God glory whenever the good thing does happen. Leah, on the other hand, again, she's naming these children with God in mind. Who are we going to be? Are we going to be like Leah, who whenever good things happen, we are immediately thinking about how good God is to us and expressing that thanksgiving to him? Or are we going to be like Rachel, just saying, well, that's what I deserve. I deserve these good things to happen. And we completely ignore God's goodness. Who are we going to be? I pray that each of us will be very cognizant, be very aware of just how good God has been to us, and give him glory, give him thanks, show him appreciation. We're not owed anything. And everything we receive is a blessing and a grace from God. Let's express that even today. I'm looking forward to being with everyone tonight for our Bible studies at 7 p.m. Hope that you can join us then. And we'll be back at it again tomorrow, reading from Genesis chapter 31 as well. Have a great Wednesday, everyone. See you here in a little bit. Take care. God bless.